Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Welcome to the big news. The topic for today's discussion, Cambridge Analytica scandal. Before we understand what this topic is in greater detail, a quick gentle reminder. BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS would be conducting a free IAS workshop exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep application today at 6 p.m. and the session will be handled by Anubhav Sarant sir. What is the agenda? Note making and revision plan to excel in UPSC CSE 2023. So tune in live on a BYJU'S Exam Prep application at 6 p.m. Let's get started and try and understand what is this article all about. Let's look into the context. Facebook owner Meta Platforms Inc. has agreed to pay $725 million to resolve a class action lawsuit accusing the social media giant of allowing third parties, including Cambridge Analytica, to access users' personal information. There are two issues here. One is Facebook paying the compensation for the damages. The other is what is called as the class action suit. What is this class action suit? This is also called by the name representative suit. What is this class action suit or the representative suit? This is where a large number of people who have similar or same injury that is created by one of the parties, they all file a case together represented by one or two of the people is what is called as the class action lawsuit. Let me simplify this process for you. In this particular case, what we have is Facebook, which happens to be one of the parties. Then you also have users of Facebook who happen to be the other party as well. When you consider the users, number of people are the users of Facebook. There can be 100 people, 200 people, 1000 people, lakh people, so on and so forth. So all those people who witness data breach, they all come together. They will be represented by one or two parties. So when these users, one or two or 10 or 100 or 1000, they all come together and they have a case against Facebook, which happens to be another party. That is what is called as class action suit. So you have a representation of people who come up together, they file a case against another party, which is called as the class action suit or representative suit. So there will be one party against whom number of people who have been harmed, where they have caused some injury, they file a case against another party so that they can bring a claim in front of the court is what is called as the class action suit. Now let us try and understand what is this Cambridge Analytica scandal. In this particular case, lawyers for the plaintiffs call the proposed settlement the largest to ever to be achieved in a US data privacy class action and the most that Meta has ever paid to resolve a class action suit. What is this controversy all about? When you look into Cambridge Analytica controversy, Cambridge Analytica, now defunct, worked for Donald Trump's successful presidential campaign in 2016 and gained access to personal information from millions of Facebook accounts for the purposes of voter profiling and targeting. Cambridge Analytica obtained that information without users' consent from a researcher who had been allowed by Facebook to deploy an app on its social media network that harvested data from millions of its users. Let us try and understand what is this issue all about. Cambridge Analytica happens to be one of the company. Where is it based out of? It is based out of United Kingdom. Its parent company happens to be Strategic Communication Laboratory. What is it involved in? This particular company is basically one of the company which specializes in data, analytics, strategy, so on and so forth. This company Cambridge Analytica, it also supports political parties and its leaders as well. So it helps political campaigns. They also make sure that this particular person, whosoever they are supporting, their value increases on the social media platform and ultimately they are able to change the perception of this person contesting the election on the online platform. How do they do it? Basically, they collect the information of the user. Let's say for example there is a person A, or let's say for example there is a person B. So this person A has certain perceptions about a political party. This person B has a certain inclination towards an ideology as well. So they try and understand all the information about these two people. They gauge maximum information about them and ultimately they influence them by giving out certain information by targeted specialized ads as well as advertisements. So what does this Cambridge Analytica as a company do? They will basically have few users whom they target. They understand what the likes are, what is the kind of information that they want, which political party and its inclination that they favor, and ultimately if they are against this political candidate, they start targeting this particular person by constantly feeding information so that this person is ultimately able to change the perception about that political candidate. This is what Cambridge Analytica does. Back in the year 2014, what exactly happened? We have one of the persons called as Alexander Kogan. He starts to collect data through an APP under the contract from Cambridge Analytica in the year 2015. What exactly happens? This person, that is Alexander Kogan, happens to be a psychology professor who is working at Cambridge University. He was paid by this Cambridge Analytica to develop an application. So what does this person do? He goes on to develop an application called as This Is Your Digital Life. So he goes on to harvest the data, mine the data of the people who are present on Facebook. So if there are people who are present on Facebook, back now what we have is Meta, but back then it was Facebook. So this particular application is put up on Facebook. So the user will give permission to this particular person for use of this application on Facebook. So the minute user has given the consent, this person and its application start mining the data of the people. How do they mine the data? They would want to know what are the likes of this person, what are his political inclinations, what does he like, so on and so forth, and ultimately this data would be extracted and ultimately given to Cambridge Analytica. So this person was able to create an application, know the likes, dislikes and political perceptions about that particular person, and ultimately he sold this data to Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica had paid him, he got all the data and ultimately gave it to Cambridge Analytica. Added to this, there are people whose data was also taken as well. So these were the people who had given consent to this particular application, but these people's friends who had not given their consent, somehow they had a loophole. They were also able to get the information of those people's friends as well, and ultimately this was given to Cambridge Analytica. So Cambridge Analytica, as we discussed, with this particular data was able to influence the elections of United States of America back in 2016, when we had Donald Trump, who was contesting back then as the president of the United States of America. He was the candidate who wanted to become the president, so they were able to influence the democracy. So by accepting the application terms and condition, users allowed collection of data about themselves and their friends. This included third-party commercial data sharing as well, and Facebook app review policy missed this critical information. So they felt that he might not share the data, but then he went on to share the data. This was the loophole that Facebook had, and ultimately, because there was data breach, privacy of an individual was breached. These people whose privacy was breached, they all come together. They file a class action suit against Facebook. So remember, there was violation of data privacy, data that they had given to Facebook, where data supposed to have been taken care, supposed to have been safeguarded, was ultimately breached. So all these people come up together, they filed the case against Facebook, and that is the case that we are discussing, which is about data privacy as well as the data breach. So how did Facebook respond? In 2019, Facebook agreed to pay $5 billion to resolve a Federal Trade Commission probe into the privacy practices and $100 million to settle US Securities and Exchange Commission claims that it misled investors about the misuse of users' data. Investigation by State Attorney General are ongoing, and the company is still fighting a lawsuit by the Attorney General for Washington DC. The settlement resolved claims by Facebook users that company violated various federal and state laws by letting app developers, business partners harvest their personal data without their consent on a wider basis. The user's lawyer alleged that Facebook misled them into thinking they could keep control over personal data when in fact it let thousands of preferred outsiders gain access as well. So what does the settlement cover? The settlement covers an estimated 250 to 280 million Facebook users according to Thursday's court filing. How much an individual user receives will depend on how many people submit valid claims for a share of the settlement, and lawyers for the plaintiff say they plan to ask the judge to award them up to 25% of the settlement as attorney's fees equaling about $181 million. What are the implications? Is data privacy a myth in this 21st century? Yes. When we speak about consent, the first issue this entire Cambridge Analytica issue points out is with respect to the consent. The consent was given by an individual or a group of people, but their friend's consent was not taken in this particular backdrop. This clearly sends out an imminent threat that we have in the digital world. There is very little accountability that a company has to these individuals. Data that is given by the people can also be used by third party as well without their consent, and the company has very little accountability about the control of all these issues. Added to it, whenever there is a person who's joining Facebook or is giving consent, what could this consent be should be ideally explained by that particular company, which happens to be Facebook. But in this case, this awareness was not given by the company. So what this has resulted is in the breach of data privacy as well as critical information. Then it also means that the security of this company, so ideally data breach should have not occurred. This means the security which should have been taken care by Facebook, now Meta, is also not good according to this particular issue. All this clearly goes on to point out that consent was not given, awareness was not given to the people, and there was security breach with respect to this incident. This also raises a couple of ethical issues as well. What are those ethical issues? One is in terms of the trust. So they give this information because they are able to trust this particular company that will safeguard the information of the user. But now with this Cambridge Analytica scandal, what we see is breach of trust of millions of Facebook users. This also promoted disinformation campaign as well. People were also targeted as well. Their perceptions were changed as well, and ultimately it disrupted the intellectual and civil discourse over this particular period of time. The second ethical issue is loss of credibility. Now that it lost the trust of the people, there is loss of credibility of a particular company as well, and at the same time it has also resulted in data manipulation. So this happens to be the ethical issue that are involved with the Cambridge Analytica issue. So what is the way forward? What should be done going forward? Basically what we require is data localization loss. So whenever there is data breach, what we actually see is that there are servers which are present in some other country, and this is leading to all these issues. So the major problem that we see is that there are no data localization laws. So going forward, data localization should be part of any data protection laws. Added to it, regulations will also have to compel all businesses as well as organizations to adopt privacy by design principles, take consent of the people every now and then, and also give them an awareness as well. When an application is asking for the permission, what is this application all about? What are the user information that they are taking? Everything should be taken. So what we have is checker box that is given. If they are taking certain information, so there has to be check boxes for everything. This should also be part of the application as well. And what we require is data privacy laws that have to be part of a particular country. As of now in India, we do not have the data protection law. There is a bill that is proposed, but once it turns into the reality, all these areas will have to be taken into picture by the relevant governments. In India, these will also have to be implemented so that the company pays the compensation if there is violation of privacy or the data breach. It is this that we have to understand with respect to this article. So that's it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.